You said that Bitcoin could fall 50%. Well, guess what? You're almost exactly right. That's about what it's down from its high. So what's your strategy now?
Yeah, we're certainly aware it's a very speculative market, and it's volatile on the upside. It can be volatile on the downside. But we've had a 64% fall from its peak to the trough a couple of days ago, and that's actually exactly the average decline in the Bitcoin market over the last 7 bear market cycles. So the past doesn't predict the future, but it seems like this is about the right downdraft. The other stat to note is it typically has had on average a 71-day bear market, and we're 52 days into this. So it seems like another couple of weeks and everything will be kind of normal, and it can start grinding back up.
Why? Why in a couple of weeks? What's going to normalize about this market then?
Well, I think the fundamentals are fantastic, and we can go over those separately. But there is such an institutional appetite to get exposure to this. It's a $500 billion asset class that nobody owns. That's a pretty wild circumstance. And it's also got a 0.1% correlation to the rest of the financial markets. Greg in the last segment was talking about risk on, risk off. Almost everything else in the world is highly, highly correlated, either close to +1 or -1. And Bitcoin is still so under-owned by institutional investors that it trades kind of its own beat.
Dan, it's Karen. Let me ask you something. How do you think about potential pending regulation? Is that a good thing, a bad thing for the space? What do you think?
It's a good thing. I think the U.S. regulatory bodies have done an excellent job. The IRS ruled on Bitcoin many years ago that it was property, and so you get long-term capital gains tax treatment if you hold it for a year. The CFTC has been very progressive about this, and now we have CME futures on Bitcoin. And the SEC's ruled a few things are securities and should be registered, but in general has allowed the market to develop. So the pace so far has been very good from the regulatory bodies, and a little more regulation is probably helpful.
Hey, Dan, you just mentioned futures being listed in early December. I mean, has that changed the game a bit? Has it made it easier for you to accept capital inflows and expand your capital base and put it to work?
Yeah, I think the futures are a very, very small part of the industry, and it's much like the fiat currency markets. It's almost all exclusively cash trading and not much in futures.
Hey, Dan, it's very interesting when you think about what's been developing on the platforms. I'm curious, what part of the whole crypto, is it the tokens or is it the platforms themselves and the developers on those platforms that gives you the most interest right now?
Yeah, so the big currencies are interesting to trade, and our long-short hedge fund does trade Bitcoin, Ethereum, all the big ones. But for my mind, the most interesting bit are these new protocol tokens, ICOs as they're called, because they're kind of like the small caps of the industry.